Hi, I'm Terry Ammerman with the Terry Ammerman Group. I am a communications expert who has done communication coaching for most of my career. What I wanted to talk to you about today is how to have a safe conversation when you're dealing with conflict. There are so many times when we're upset about something or we feel that we aren't able to really talk to somebody about something that's important to us. And I wanted to give you some tips that may help you with that along the way. First of all, you need to have an element of emotional control. Mina Irfan talks a lot about emotional control, and that's essentially not being highly triggered by something and having an overreaction to it. So, the first thing I recommend that you do if you want to talk to someone about something that perhaps upset you or that just needs to be dealt with is that you pick a time. And you want to pick a time when you've thought it through a little bit and you are not so emotionally overwrought. If you are ready to give somebody a piece of your mind and you need to tell them why this is so upsetting to you and you are sick and tired of this going on, you're not going to be effective as a communicator. You might feel good about it for a couple of minutes, maybe 10 minutes, but it's going to do more damage than good to your relationship. So you want to pick a time and alert the person, whether it's your husband, your child, an employee, an employer. I'd like to talk with you about something later on this afternoon. Do you have 10 minutes at about 2 o'clock? If it's your husband, it might be, honey, there's something on my mind that I'd like to talk to you about. And so after dinner tonight, could we sit down for about 10 minutes and talk? That is going to help that person to get a little bit mentally ready for it. So maybe, let's say your husband says, well, let's just talk about it right now. You can say, you know what? I'd rather sit down when we are not trying to cook dinner and get the kids off to their practices. And so I really would like to wait until after dinner tonight. Then when you're sitting down to talk about it, if you have mutual values together, and I would hope that you do within your marriage, within your workplace, with your children, with a friend, let's say, for example, a mutual value that you have with your husband is a peaceful home. So you might start the conversation with, you know, honey, I know a mutual value for both of us is a peaceful home. That's really important to me. It's really important to you. Last night, when we were talking about the kids' soccer games and how many of them we are going to, you actually yelled at me. And that does not make me feel like we have a peaceful home. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. Pause. See what he has to say. He might immediately say, you're right, I'm sorry. He might say, well, I was just really upset about. And then what you don't want to do is get into a long, overdrawn argument about who's right. And what you also don't want to do is get into a long, overdrawn argument about the soccer games. It is so easy for people to deflect the real situation. The real situation is that your husband raised his voice to you last night and it upset you. And let's talk about this because this is a whole nother topic, but if it's the first time it's happened and you address it in a kind and caring way, it's not going to repeat. But the first time it happens, if you let it go, and now it's been going on for 5 years, it's going to be a lot harder for him to break that behavior. So what you're doing is you're saying that you're talking about your values. One of our values is a peaceful home. And then you are telling in a very honest but kind way what happened. So what you're doing here is, first of all, you waited until you could talk, and you were not upset with him. So picture when you have a disagreement that you either can be on opposite sides of the table, and that's usually what happens. Think of two attorneys and they're negotiating. That's what you don't want. What you want is you want to be both on the same side of the table, and then the issue is in front of you. And when you can tie the issue to a value that you know both of you have, it's a lot easier to move forward with that conversation. So let's say, for example, you sense or you found out for sure that one of your children lied to you. Again, you do not waltz into the bedroom and say, I got a call from your principal. You lied to me. You told me that homework wasn't due today, and it was. That feels good at the moment. It does not work. So the reality here is that the more in control you are of your emotions, the more intentional you are about your communication, the more effective it is. You can yell and scream all you want to, but people will quit paying attention to you and you won't solve the problem. So back to your child who lied to you. You pick a time. John, I want to talk after dinner tonight for about 10 minutes about something that happened today. So please plan on us meeting in your room. Or maybe you don't want to meet in his room. Maybe you need to meet in your room or your office or wherever, and we'll talk for about 10 minutes. And then when you get together, you tie it back to a value. John, one of the most important things for any relationship, for our family, for this household, is honesty. So when I find out that you have been dishonest with me, it hurts our relationship. It makes it very hard for me to trust you. So can I tell you about what I heard today? And I want to hear your side of the story and what's going on with you. And then you explain, I got a call from your principal who said your homework was due today. Last night you told me it wasn't due. So tell me what's going on with you. So here's another thing that you included in that conversation. Tell me what's going on. Now, in a situation like that, maybe he's going to vent. Well, I've just got so much going on that I can't keep up with it, and it's just too much for me to handle, and I feel like I'm failing everything. That may be a vent of a teenager, but that's important information. Let him vent. In fact, we recommend in our training that we do with our corporate clients that when a customer or a community member is venting, just listen. Wait until they're done. We call it emptying the tank. Wait until they're completely done. Leave a little bit of silence, and then you can start talking. Now, if you're just yelling back and forth, again, it's not effective. You're not getting done what you want to get done. If you ever go into any conflict resolution, any discussion with a loved one, an employee, a family member, a dear friend, and you need to be right and they're wrong, it will not be effective. Now, That doesn't mean that you're not going to have to make tough choices. That doesn't mean that you're not going to calmly say, if this continues, then I'm not going to be able to stay. If your husband's cheating, for example, if this continues, I don't feel safe in this marriage, I'm not going to be able to stay. You can say that, believe it or not, calmly. And I know I'm going to a big extreme here, but the whole point is that I go back to that concept that I've mentioned before, energetic boundaries. You want to decide before you go into that conflict resolution, into that tough discussion, what you are available for. So if you're not available for being yelled at, you can say that. But then you also have to decide what you're going to do about that. Now that's different than an ultimatum. An ultimatum is, if you ever yell at me again, I am out of here. Now, you might say that in a heat of passion, in a really upset situation, and that may not be the truth. That's what we call an empty promise. And so if he yells at you again and you're not out of there, you've created a new pattern. But if you decide that anytime someone raises their voice to you, you are going to stop the conversation and walk away, that you can do. You may not even have to tell your husband that that's what you're doing, but that's what you can do. You can do the same thing with an employee, with an employer. Now, let's say you have an employer, you have a boss who yells at you. What do you do about that? Well, first of all, if you have a boss who continually yells at you, you have let your value in your own eyes decrease, and you're putting up with things that personally I would recommend you not put up with. And you might say, well, Terry, that's easy for you to say, but I need the money. Well, I agree with that. But there are jobs out there with bosses who don't yell. So what do? If someone raises their voice to you and starts yelling at you, you can stop. You can say, I hear that you're upset. I want to do my best work for you, but I cannot hear what you're saying when you're yelling at me like that. So I'm going to ask that we have this conversation when you're not quite so upset. And then if you can walk away, walk away. You might have to say, I'm going to go to the restroom now. And then just get up from your desk and walk away. That takes guts. That takes emotional control. So what I'm really doing here is I'm tying in conflict resolution to emotional control. If you're yelling at people all day or they're yelling at you all day, there is something going on that's much bigger than your communication skills. But if that's not the case, if you are just dealing with a tough situation, a one-time situation with a boss, an employee, a loved one, if you go in with an intention to solve the problem together, and if you base it on a value that you know both of you have, your success rate is going to go way up. And you're going to be able to walk away feeling good about what you said. Now, in all fairness, you may walk away with a sick feeling in your stomach, your hands might be shaking a little bit, and he or she may be angry with you. We are not responsible for other people's reactions to our words and conversation. We are responsible for our own words and conversation. So if you go into a situation and you communicate with integrity and your words are kind and honest, and that person blows up, that's not your problem. I could talk about this for hours, but I think that this is a good place for us to stop. If you want to hear more communication tips, please subscribe, and hit that like button below. I'll be back soon.